We've heard a lot about sustainable development, but what about property rights? Are they sustainable too? Few things mean more to us than our property. It is not only shelter, but a way to build savings and something we can pass on to our children. Yet all over the country, private property is under attack. The Sacketts in Idaho are fighting the EPA to build their home. Homeowners in Washington state lost the use of 65% of their property thanks to local zoning regulations, and 1,500 property owners in Florida are being forced out of their home by the local environmental agency. And it's not just small homeowners. In Montana, Big Meadows Grazing has lost the value of thousands of acres of land to a conservation easement with the Department of Agriculture, and now the only way to get their money back is to sell their land to the government. States, counties, and municipalities across the nation are writing bills and resolutions exposing the loss of land to try and stop it. But what is going on? Is there a real problem or just someone's imagination? To understand that, we have to go back to a meeting in Vancouver in 1976. At a UN conference, an action plan was created. Under the preamble to land, here's what the plan said. Land cannot be controlled by individuals and subject to the inefficiencies of the market. Private land is a principal means of accumulation of wealth and contributes to social injustice. If unchecked, it may become a major obstacle in the planning and implementation of development schemes. Social justice can only be achieved if land is used in the interests of society as a whole. The plan is saying it is unfair for people to own land, so the government needs to take it over. Now, this is the opposite of just about everything Americans stand for. And notice the words. Even though this is 40 years ago, they're talking about social justice, injustice, private property as a planning obstacle. Normally, this would be just crazy stuff, except William K. Riley signed on to the plan for the United States. He later became the administrator for the EPA under George H. Bush. In 1987, these same ideas were encapsulated in a UN report credited to Gro Brundtland and often called the Brundtland Report. In Chapter 2, they define the now familiar term, sustainable development. Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But how can you protect future generations when we only broadly know what their needs will be? Well, the authors had an answer for that. The report explains, if governments can control social equity or the society, economy, and the environment, the future will be okay. The problem is that means controlling everything. Again, this is a nutty idea that probably should have gone nowhere. But several non-governmental organizations, including the Sierra Club, ICLEI, and the Nature Conservancy, wrote a book called Agenda 21 that turned the report into a set of goals that were introduced at the Earth Summit in 1992. One of the goals was to create a wildlands project that literally forbade Americans to live in any of the red areas on this map and barely go near the yellow. Just as was written in the 1976 Vancouver Plan, most urban people would be moved into high-density living in controlled urban areas. Those are the small black dots on the map. Again, this probably would not have meant much. Except that in 1993, President Clinton signed an executive order creating the President's Council on Sustainable Development. If you go to the UN's website, it says, the President's Council on Sustainable Development was conceived to formulate recommendations for the implementation of Agenda 21. That was it. No vote by the people, no say by Congress. It was just signed into law by the President. But it didn't stop there. Not only did the federal agencies abide by the new Agenda 21 recommendations, the NGOs that wrote Agenda 21 also sat on the same President's Council. Together they formed committees and wrote the regulations that are the laws we abide by. That is how a 1976 UN idea in Vancouver that was never even a treaty became a series of regulations managing our lives today. And here's how we know this is true. The Federal Register contains all government regulations. On page 45,157, it tells us, the EPA's Sustainable Development Challenge Grant Program is also a step in implementing Agenda 21, the Global Plan of Action on Sustainable Development, signed by the United States at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. But it's not just the EPA. If you look at HUD's 2010 funding notice for the Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant, on the first page it mentions the same economy, social equity, and environment as in the Brundtland Report. But it goes further. On page 58, the agreement mandates that if you create a regional plan for sustainable development, you must reduce social and economic disparities, you must decrease vehicle miles traveled, you must decrease housing costs, you must increase the proportion of low-income households. That is exactly what is contained in the original Agenda 21 goals. But these are not just gentle suggestions. You're being told what to do. Today, instead of the mandates above, HUD and the EPA use the 6 livability principles, which are virtually identical. By 2012, state agencies, national and regional associations across the country had signed on to the now mainstream idea of the Brundtland Report Sustainable Development. Few realized the origins or the sweeping personal and property restrictions they were promoting for future generations through planners, grants, and federal partnerships. To show you how serious this is, at a UN conference in 2002, Harvey Reuven said, individual wants, needs, and desires are to be conformed to the views and dictates of government planners. In the implementation of sustainable development, individual rights will have to take a backseat to the collective. Now, Harvey Reuven is not a nobody. He is one of the founders of ICLEI, the group that helped write federal regulations, and the clerk of the court in Dade County, Florida. Agenda 21 Sustainable Development is not political. It is a global plan of action to protect the planet and reduce poverty by transferring wealth, converting private property into public control, moving families into high-density living. It comes to your community through federal regulations, grants, conservation easements, regional planning councils, and government-sponsored education projects. Piece by piece, this is becoming a reality. The only way to stop this is to reject planning that places our property and our lifestyles at risk. Our public officials are our last line of defense. We will work with you. We need your help.